Hi everyone, and thanks Brand Innovators for having us. And just to address, we are friends, but we did not coordinate the outfits. Great, thank you. So Sarah, we are going to get into new ways to win in sports marketing. I know you're only 4 months into the new role at Fulham. Give me a little bit of a sense of what your role involves and also what you've done prior, because you've got an amazing career in sports.
Thanks, and hi everyone. I guess the first thing to say is Fulham Football Club, with a postcode of SW6, couldn't feel further away than where we are right now in terms of its demographic, its audience, and its locale. I also have another confession to make. I've definitely stolen a few Beavertown glasses, so maybe that gives me a bit more grit and edge for this talk. But no, I've been at Fulham for 4 months. We're a club that is growing sustainably and has done for a few years. Used to bounce up and down a little bit between the top 2 divisions of English football. But we've recently been sustainably growing both on the pitch but also off of it. Big part of what we're doing at the moment and what I'm there to do is to create a long-term legacy for the club, to create new opportunity and new revenue streams for the club, and to create a year-round destination that drives the success off the pitch 365 days a year, regardless of kind of the 19 home games that we play at Craven Cottage. So there is a lot to do. This summer we are launching Fulham Pier, which is a part of the new Riverside stand development. And it's about creating a destination for the local community, for our fans, for the Southwest London and London tourists and international travellers alike, that brings in event space, community building programming, a hotel, a spa, a Michelin star chef running a restaurant there called Brasserie Constance, cultural programming, art installations, all the stuff you probably don't hear so much coming from a football club. I think reflecting on the previous conversation, that is all about understanding who you are, where you are, and playing to your strengths. But yeah, I'm only 4 months into that. Before joining Fulham, I was at Six Nations Rugby, spent 4 or 5 years there, building global audiences, building the brand, developing our competitions, understanding fan engagement and taking that to a new level in a sport quite often challenged by things that happen off the pitch and kind of the roughness and the rigour of the sport. And prior to that, I was at DAZN, so world's first OTT sports broadcaster. So that was about building a brand from scratch, launching a new product in new markets all around the world, taking on incumbents like Sky and TNT and Bell and Rogers and big US broadcasters, and trying to create a new way of watching sport, a new way of engaging fans, and a new way of generally consuming. But I guess most of all, the red thread throughout my career has been about how do you create meaningful relationships, whether you're selling something to a consumer or trying to inspire that ultimate fandom in a sports organisation.
So what stands out to me is, you're chief marketing officer for Fulham Football, but then you've got this whole venue that you've got to make revenue from. That's a huge task, firstly. It's also maybe not surprising from the stadium front, but it does interest me, the business of football, because to someone that doesn't know the intricacies, and for the Americans, I was in New York for 15 years. I'm more on the American football side of things. But talk to me about why football teams are doing this diversification, because from the outside you just think, oh, great, it's just about the merchandise, it's just about selling tickets. Talk to me about the business. And I'm particularly interested in this because I was talking to the CMO of Arsenal, I think it was Arsenal, and he was talking about fine art and how that was a huge revenue stream. So talk to me about why football clubs are doing this.
Well, I guess, first of all, running a football team is really expensive. And whilst the Premier League is the premium competition in the world and attracts the largest figures from a media rights perspective, a lot of that money then flows back to the club. It has and for a long time been the primary revenue generator. And then on a match day, you are somewhat addicted to the crack cocaine of selling tickets and selling shirts. And that has become a cyclical thing. I think more and more clubs have realised that in order to invest in players on the pitch, they're going to need to make more money than that. They are going to need to be relevant to sports fans all year round. They're going to need to get comfortable with attracting audiences outside of their core locale, outside of their core fan base, and they've had to think differently in terms of particularly your US example. How do I get someone based in New York to give a shit about Fulham Football Club? We've got a history of US-based players, actually, and historically have not really lent into that particularly well, but it's definitely something that is very much on the agenda moving forward. How do you maintain a connection and a relevance to audiences that haven't grown up on the bank of the River Thames or in that sort of space and location? So I think you're seeing more and more football clubs. Arsenal are a very good example. In a fairly short space of time, they've gone from a club that was known for not having much atmosphere to a club that has absolute relevance in many, many aspects of culture and of their fans' lifestyle. I think Juliette Slot, the Chief Commercial Officer there, has done a fantastic job, and the team that she's built out, the marketing team there, are absolutely stunning. Something we would hope to emulate as we kind of get a bit braver and build out our teams and start to kind of really build out what we're doing in the community in a much more relevant and significant way.
Great. And then just to piggyback off the cultural question, the internal culture, what are you trying to create there? Operationally, it sounds like a huge job. Talk to me a little bit about what your thinking is about how you're building out those teams and what's the thread in terms of culture that you want to see for them all.
Yeah, it's quite mad, really. The CMO of Fulham Football Club having the responsibility to grow engagement and understand the business of football, whilst also market, brand and market, and create a destination that has nothing to do with football, or largely nothing to do with football, is a really quite a unique opportunity, and one of the reasons I was really attracted to the role. We've got two very different sides to the business. We've got people who have been involved in football for a long, long time. They know football inside out. They've grown up with Fulham as part of their lifeblood. And then the other part of my team are handfuls of weeks into their roles. They've come from Soho House Group and the Ivy Group and Battersea Power Station and places that are used to thinking about a very different proposition. Part of my job is to bridge internally those two businesses, make sure that our values and the culture that we have internally, that all the good stuff that has grown through decades and decades. Fulham's like nearly 150 years old. It's London's oldest football club. How do we make sure that that is felt and honoured by new people coming into the organisation, but that we also take those incredible experiences and external references from new perspectives coming in, and we kind of create something that feels like one team, although we're organising very different parts of the business and driving success on and off the pitch as a result of it.
Yeah, and talk to me in terms of 5 years down the line, what does really good for you look like in terms of the KPIs and the audiences that you're engaging with? I think we were talking last night about, what generation is it? Generation Alpha, how they're consuming sport so differently. So talk to me a little bit about, what you're predicting and who you're trying to entice.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. If you asked our owner, our shareholder, what does success look like, I'm sure he'd tell you loads of money. That's what we're aiming for. But how we get there is by really understanding what role we play in the community. So if you speak to any football fan, they will tell you they want to see you spend money on buying the best players and getting higher up the league as quickly as possible, please. Ideally winning the Premiership, ideally winning the Champions League. We're not going to throw loads of money at players in that way. That's not how we build a sustainable business. There's lots of things that can affect your performance on the pitch. But if we grow a sustainable business off the pitch, that gives us the ability to invest back in players on the pitch. I quite like the idea that our SW6 postcode and the sorts of things that we're bringing to market could attract a whole bunch of rival Chelsea fans from down the road to come and enjoy a nice meal at Brasserie Constance that will be directly impacting the next player that we buy on the pitch. That's quite a nice thought. When you explain it like that to fans, they understand our role in the community matters. It isn't just about five-star dining. It's about community, education, culture, leaning into some of the stuff that South West London has largely been underserved, and taking that really crucial role that a football club plays in the community and expanding its wings and giving it relevance and meaning with a fan base and a locale that gives you the opportunity to do that.
And who else is doing this well?
I think there's quite a few football clubs that are playing to their strengths. I think we took a look at this probably 5 or 6 years ago, maybe more, way before my time. I can't claim any of the credit for it. And went, right, okay, we're seeing what Arsenal are doing, we're seeing what Spurs have done, we're seeing what other stadiums around the world have been doing. We can't just rinse and repeat that, because we haven't got the capacity. We're not an 80,000 seater stadium, so we can't host Beyonce for 6 consecutive nights. We would need to float a boat down the river and crane in some music equipment and then really piss off our local residents to do that. That wouldn't be the right thing for us to do. But we are a beautiful riverside location. Let's lean into that waterfront. Let's make the most of that position on the Thames. Let's lean into the fact that we are London's oldest football club, and really understand that history and that heritage and how we create those kind of extended experiences for fans to be part of. And that's really kind of what we've done. So I think, if you ever did see us put on a music concert, it would much more likely be facing the stage the other way, laying the pitch out, having loads of round tables and doing a candlelit acoustic set with an Ed Sheeran or an Adele that only 5,000 people got access to for one night only. That would be playing to our strengths. We're not going to be Coldplay for 6 nights. And we are going to be much more about art installations and educational programs and things that really benefit the community.
I love it. And compare and contrast with Six Nations, because just in terms of the different speed at which the sport is growing and diversifying, when you look back at Six Nations, what would your advice be perhaps to grow that now that you're in the football space?
Yeah, I absolutely love my time at Six Nations. Rugby is truly one of the greatest sports, and it has some incredible values that it's hard to find sometimes in football. That sense of togetherness, rugby and Six Nations particularly was a competition that brought fans together. Everybody looked forward to it. Everybody kind of understood that special time of year that the Six Nations got played. It's coming out of winter, spring, reasons to be cheerful. Fans celebrating together before, during and after the game, no matter what the result. Players picking each other up off the pitch after they've literally just run into each other and, like gladiators. I love that. And it has so many brilliant, rich qualities to it, but it really struggled with its sense of identity at times. It really struggled with allowing players to have personalities, to be, ambassadors for the game. It was really sort of suffered a bit of tall poppy syndrome. Every time a player was sort of up there and out there speaking about things, it was a bit squashed. The team's more important than an individual. So I think it's taken a long time for the sport to realise that needs to change. Allow players to have a voice, have a platform. I think we probably saw the best example of that recently with the Lions announcement. Maro Itoje, first black captain of the Lions squad. He's somebody with an incredible personality, an incredible array of interests that are really bringing fresh voices, fresh energy into the game. So I think it's got a really bright future. I just think kind of sometimes the speed of change, it kind of got in the way of itself sometimes.
Yeah, interesting. And we didn't talk about this, but were you part of the reason that they did the Netflix special? Was that? I haven't actually watched it, but I mean to with my son.
Yeah.
Oh, you were? Well,
yeah, 2 seasons. Okay. 2 seasons of it. A great example, actually. I think just getting 6 international rugby teams to agree to let cameras into sacred spaces where cameras hadn't been before. A long, long time ago, there was a documentary called Living with the Lions, which is probably the best example of rugby being true and authentic. And partly because they didn't know they were being filmed. One of their players just set up a little camera in a changing room, and a documentary got created off the back of it. We tried to do it a bit more orchestrated than that, and we partnered with Netflix to do it. And the production crew that did Drive to Survive. So very well seasoned, very much understand the sensitivities of a high-performance environment. And, yeah, to a certain extent, successful. Rugby let cameras into places it hadn't done before. we started to see the human side of people, their lives off the pitch. And if you care about people off the pitch, you've got half a chance of bringing people in and getting them to care about what they're doing on the pitch, which was the big, opportunity. So yes, new audiences came in for sure, but it was tough. It was difficult to get that real, authentic access that is really required for a documentary like that to succeed.
Did it not succeed in your eyes then?
I think from a Netflix point of view, rugby was probably seen if you look at what they've done recently, things like Love It or Loathe It, the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. Like, you've got two people there who are prepared to throw their entire lives at promoting a nothing fight, and it was globally relevant, and there was weeks and months of build up and content, and rugby just wasn't quite seen as being able to compete with that sort of stuff. So I think if they're investing in long-term sports documentaries, rugby was a bit of a challenge to justify long-term. I hope they change their mind at some point, especially with a World Cup in the US coming up, and a lot of interesting stuff that rugby is trying to organise itself better around at the moment that should be really of interest to Netflix and the likes.
For sure. So in terms of talking about the brand of Fulham Football Club and just getting back to football, and maybe it's too early for you to sort of talk about the branded campaigns that you're doing, but how much onus are you putting on that versus, because we talked about the commercials really. So talk about how you are amplifying the brand and kind of the direction that you're going to take.
Yeah, I think for Fulham Football Club, Fulham has always done quite a good job of talking football to its core fans. What we now need to do is understand where the biggest growth levers are in terms of growing audiences, and quite frankly, it's the women's game and its international audiences. So on the football side of things, those will be the two sort of strategic areas of focus. From a Fulham peer perspective, we're building a brand from scratch, and you won't see Fulham Football Club associated with Fulham peer marketing campaigns. This is about creating a destination that happens to be attached to the side of a football club in this beautiful waterfront location. But walking through the space, there are 7 layers to it. There's one logo, and that's on a glass bridge that leads from the chairman's suite out to his seats in the director's box. That is the only logo in that entire space, because the rest of that space is about being a part of the community. It's not about football. It's about brilliant food and beverage experiences. It's about brilliant cultural programming. It's about art. It's about interiors. It's about being in a space that you would want to be in, regardless of whether it's attached to a football club or not.
Interesting. And then we touched on this, but culturally, fans are digesting sport just very differently. So talk to us about just your top 3 areas that you think sports teams should focus on, and how that connects with the viewership and the consuming of sport, because it's not just the 90-minute game, is it, anymore? And it's quite often the 10-second clip on YouTube. So what do you think sports teams should be doing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a real point of tension amongst clubs and broadcasters, because the reality is younger generations are consuming less live sport, fact. But they are consuming more sport overall. The tension comes is in the fact that sometimes actually it's not necessarily the outcome that matters. It was that moment in that game that I was at, or I saw a really interesting angle on, or a clip of, or a different kind of commentary to, or a really funny gif about, or whatever it might be. So it's not always the outcome that matters. It's not always the 90 minutes that matters. It's everything around it. Football, and we talked about comparisons to rugby before, football is beautifully placed in terms of attracting new audiences that are attracted to the cultural fluidity of the game. And that is, what are they eating for breakfast? What are they wearing? What music are they listening to? What art exhibition are they going to when they're in Paris for the NBA games? It's all of the lifestyle aspects around the sport that make football really, really interesting. And it's not afraid to embrace all of that diversity, all of that uniqueness, and give players a platform to do that. I mean, so many examples of I know, old one that's been used timelessly is Ronaldo switching teams and immediately 800,000 to 1 million shirt sales of said new team, hit the books of the new club. That is kind of what we're seeing more now with kind of people following individuals and players rather than teams. And I think we've got to not be afraid of that, not be afraid to kind of embrace all of that richness that comes with the players and their history and their heritage. We recently did a quite a fun partnership with Royal Caribbean, where we launched the Going Away shirt, and it was just a sneaky bit of irreverent social content that was a Hawaiian shirt and a kind of clip of a player wearing a Hawaiian shirt. It's one of the best performing pieces of social content we've done, and fans going absolutely crazy for where can I get this shirt from. Players actually hated it. Because but we had a bit of fun with it, and now we might bring out a limited edition Hawaiian shirt. Look, it's just about understanding how you play a role in people's lives, whether it's digitally, socially, in the community, outside of that 90 minutes, and being prepared to invest in your team to do that.
Really quick one about women's sports. We didn't talk about that in our sort of discussions, but how are you capitalising, and what are your predictions on the growth there?
I mean, it's the fastest growing element of any sports conversation at the moment is the growth of women's sport. And I was at a really fantastic event with Mary Earps a couple of weeks ago, just before she announced her retirement, ahead of the big competition this summer for the Lionesses. And what a great ambassador for the game. If you listen to the Women's Sports Trust or any of the research that they've done on the growth of women's sport, some incredible statistics. If you pull people in under the category of women's sport, they watch one event, they're likely to go on and watch 5 other women's sport events, not because they're particularly suddenly interested in cricket or motorsport, but because they really, really care about women's sport getting the visibility and the growth and the commercial investment that it deserves. For Fulham, we've just been promoted. Our women's team has just won its league, and our aim is to keep that momentum going. So we would love to see them at the top of the next division that they're in, and we want to see them in the Women's Super League as soon as possible. So it's a massive opportunity to bring new fans into the club and into the sport. I think we've seen with the growth of women's sport and growth of women's football, there's a whole bunch of free fans floating around out there that are up for grabs, and they're not finding the traditional ways in. Just because my family or my dad or my mum supported Arsenal doesn't mean I'm going to support Arsenal women. I might support Fulham women, I might support Chelsea women because I like that player, or I like what they stand for, I like what they do at the game. So it's a massive opportunity to grab, and we're ready to go and do that.
Great. Well, fascinating discussion. Could talk to you all day, but does anyone have questions from the audience?
Thanks very much. Two-part question. First is, on the football marketing side of things, how much time do you guys split between keeping fans happy and marketing to fans versus trying to market to new fans? And then on the content piece, obviously, not just football, but every sport, it seems, is getting into kind of the reality TV type game. More and more teams, I feel like, are sidestepping a Netflix or an Amazon and actually taking that stuff in-house, whether it's one-offs or producing their own series. Is that something that you guys are considering, have done already? I wouldn't know because I'm an Arsenal fan. Thank you.
I mean, congratulations on a pretty successful season. Women, very successful. My daughter's an Arsenal fan, so listen, she went to the first leg of the Arsenal-Lyon game and was, crazy. First question was, how much time do we spend? So I'd say we spend an inordinate amount of time at the moment doing the core football marketing to football fans. And that is partly because we need to maintain that connection. We need to do that well. We need to make sure that our manager and our players really feel like they've got the platform to do all of their pre-match, post-match stuff well. I think our biggest challenge is actually investing in our team at the rate that is required to give people the headspace to think beyond that. And that is definitely kind of partly what I'm hoping to change as part of being there. There is a big understanding, but not necessarily the ability to go and realise that opportunity at the moment. So at the moment, I'd say for Fulham, we're probably about 70-30 split between football and non-football related stuff. Yeah, no, I'd still say that 70-30 split is probably where we're at. Fulham took part in one of the Premier League's inaugural summer series over to the States. And that was a great opportunity for us a few years ago to see, when you go and play games over there against Premier League competition, what can that do from a fan base perspective. And our club is owned by a gentleman who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, so we've got lots of information and coming at us at pace from what US sports do well, particularly American football. So you can certainly expect to see that shift on an upward trajectory. The second question was about original content. The Premier League actually turned down a deal to do Netflix for the league. The clubs voted and decided not for us. I think you will probably see more clubs taking things into their own hands, and I think it's probably the easiest way to get player buy-in. If they have people working with them that they are used to seeing in their training camps, day in, day out, is to get that engagement, to get that authenticity, and to get that kind of buy-in from them. So it's not on the radar at the moment, but it's definitely something that I think you might see us testing and learning around.
Cool. One more question we have time for? Yes.
Thank you. My brother's a lifelong Fulham fan, so I'm used to going to the games at the cottage. How important do you think the location of Fulham is as a ground? You see a lot of other Premiership teams scaling up and kind of moving that proposition as a satellite. Do you think Fulham would ever do that, or do you think that is your home and that's what you've got to kind of scale in different ways? Or do you ever see yourself scaling up into a different stadium?
I mean, I've only been there 4 months, so I wouldn't like to put a firm on it. But right now, the answer to that would be absolutely not. Fulham is London's oldest football club. Our Johnny Haynes stand is listed, protected. It has old wooden seats that couldn't be more uncomfortable. Your knees are like this, and they will not change it. We cannot change it, and the fans that sit in those stands would be an uproar if we did. These are generational, inbuilt, lifelong, handed down seats, and they love it. And I love the kind of juxtaposition of that being the oldest stand in the country, certainly in London, definitely in London. I'm not sure about the country, but yeah, definitely in London. And then the opposite stand being the newest, with all the best facilities and kind of that complete opposite experience, and the opportunity therefore to bring in different fans and different audiences. But Craven Cottage is our home. That riverside location is absolutely part of who we are. It's the fabric of our being, and I think we took the decision to develop that site in the best way possible, and that involved us buying a bit of the Thames and building it out rather than decide to move or do anything else. So increase the capacity that way, increase the experience, and increase the opportunity.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Sarah. You're amazing. And when is it open?
We are. I mean, you might start to see some of our marketing literally this week. Opening launch weekend in June. So everybody is welcome. Free event, music, food, everything going on. Come on down.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thanks so much.